The sound of the key in the lock was the only warning. Bruce Whitman didn't expect to be home before sunset, but a wave of instinct had pulled him from the city. He found his pregnant wife, Janice, huddled in the nursery, her body trembling. Fresh, ugly bruises painted the skin along her jaw and wrist. Her tears were silent, but her words, when they came, shattered the immaculate silence of their Greenwich home. "Bruce," she whispered, her voice raw. "Am I ugly? Am I a monkey? Don't I belong here?" The Whitman estate on Round Hill Road wasn't a house. It was a statement. Built of field stone and quiet arrogance, it broadcasted 3 generations of old money dominance to the perfectly manicured Connecticut landscape. Tonight, it felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. Bruce let his Italian leather briefcase drop with a muffled thud on the black and white marble foyer. The silence was absolute. No welcome, no faint sound of music, not even the hum of the television. Just the oppressive, heavy quiet that had become the norm. He loosened his Brioni tie, the silk whispering its protest. He was a man who fixed things, broken supply chains, hostile takeovers, fluctuating markets. He was Bruce Whitman, the heir who'd quadrupled the family's shipping fortune. But this silence, this creeping chill in his own home, was a problem he couldn't liquidate. He was home early. The last-minute cancellation of the Singapore call had left an unnerving void in his schedule. He'd felt a sudden, sharp pull homeward, a prickle of unease he hadn't been able to name. Now, standing in the cathedral-like emptiness, he wished he'd stayed in the city. He found a scarf on the chair, one of Janice's. It was a vibrant silk, full of the color and life he'd fallen in love with, a stark contrast to the muted, ancestral beige of his world. He picked it up. It smelled faintly of her, of lavender and something sweet, but it was twisted, as if she had been wringing it in her hands. He walked past the grand staircase, his shoes clicking on the hardwood, and headed toward the new wing. The nursery. They'd argued about it. He'd wanted a top-tier designer from Manhattan. Janice had wanted to paint it herself. She'd won. Or so he thought. The door was ajar. He saw her, not on the heirloom rocking chair his mother had insisted upon, but on the floor, next to a half-assembled white crib. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around her 7-month belly. Her shoulders were shaking. "Janice?" His voice sounded too loud, an intrusion. She flinched, her head snapping up. The speed with which she tried to wipe her face, to compose her features into a mask of placid calm, was more alarming than the tears themselves. "Bruce, you're home." Her voice was a wisp, and then he saw it. Not just tear tracks, but a faint, purpling shadow blooming from her jawline, disappearing into her dark hair. He moved, crossing the room in 2 strides, crouching in front of her. His mind, trained to see patterns and threats, went blank. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice dropping into the low, cold tone he usually reserved for the boardroom. "Nothing. I slipped." She wouldn't look at him. Her eyes darted to the window, the crib, the floor. "I was carrying a box, and I slipped by the stairs." "Clumsy." She gave a small, brittle laugh that died instantly. He reached out, his fingers gently grazing the bruise. She flinched again, a sharp, involuntary recoil. "Janice, look at me." She did, and his stomach clenched. The woman he'd married, the vibrant artist whose laughter used to echo in these sterile halls, was gone. In her place was this haunted, pale creature, her eyes wide with a fear he didn't recognize. "It was just an accident," she whispered, a new tear rolling down her cheek. "Please don't fuss." "An accident," he repeated, the word tasting like ash. He saw her other hand, the one clutching her belly. Her wrist, where her watch should be, was raw and red. Through the open nursery window, a faint breeze carried the sound of voices from the garden below. Maria, their head housekeeper, and Sophia, one of the newer staff. They were speaking in rapid Spanish, their voices low, convinced they were alone. Pobretita. She doesn't smile anymore. Hush, the old one has ears everywhere. She was here again today. I saw. I wish El Señor would see too. He's always working. What can he do? It's his mother. Bruce went still. His mother. Margaret. The words hit him like a physical blow. He looked at Janice, her desperate, paper-thin lie. I slipped. He looked at the half-finished crib, the can of pale yellow paint she hadn't touched in weeks. He'd been so busy building an empire, he hadn't noticed the rot setting in at its very foundation. He stood up, the anger coming fast and hot, but it was hollow, undermined by a sudden, sickening wave of guilt. "I'll get you some ice," he said, his voice clipped. He walked out of the room, not looking back, his mind racing. He was Bruce Whitman. He was a fixer, and for the first time in his life, he had no idea where to even begin. In the corner of the hallway, a small black dome blinked its tiny red light, the security camera. He'd had them installed for burglars. It had never occurred to him that the threat might already be inside. The next morning, the pretense of normalcy was grotesque. The kitchen was filled with the thin, pale light of a New England dawn, making the gleaming sub-zero fridge and marble countertops feel less like a home and more like a high-end morgue. The kettle hissed. The toaster clicked. Janice moved like a fragile automaton, one hand splayed protectively across her belly, the other carefully buttering a piece of toast she would not eat. Bruce watched her. He saw the way she flinched when the butter knife grazed the tender skin of her bruised wrist, a tiny, bird-like movement. Barely perceptible. But he saw it. He snapped his laptop shut. The sound was a gunshot in the quiet room. "Did you sleep?" he asked. A nod, too quick. Her eyes were fixed on the granite island. "I'll cancel my meetings. You should rest." "No. Don't." Her head came up, a flicker of panic in her eyes. "You have to go. It's a normal day. Please, Bruce, I'm fine." Her answers were packaged, rehearsed. They felt like lines she'd practiced in front of a mirror, and the realization chilled him. She wasn't just lying about the bruises. She was actively managing him, trying to keep him at arm's length. From the garden, two groundskeepers walked past the open window, their voices carrying on the damp air. "She used to love those roses," one said, his voice a low rumble. "Used to be out here painting. Haven't seen her out here in, must be 3 months. Quiet's not always peaceful, man. Quiet's just quiet. He's always working." The housekeeper's words from last night echoed in his head. Bruce rinsed a coffee mug that was already clean, his knuckles white on the porcelain. He had been working. He'd been in Shanghai closing the port deal when Janice had called, crying after her first trimester screening. He'd told her he was busy and to have his assistant schedule a time. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, surfaced. 3 months ago, a gala at the Met. Janice, radiant in a blue dress, had been quiet on the ride home. "Bruce?" she had murmured, her head on his shoulder in the back of the Bentley. "Your mother is... she's a little intense, isn't she?" He'd been scrolling through market reports on his phone. "That's just Margaret, darling," he'd replied, not looking up. "She's old money. Her bark is worse than her bite. Don't take it personally," she said. She said my dress was vibrantly ethnic. She asked if my family summered, or if we just stayed hot. He had laughed. He'd actually laughed. "She's a dinosaur, Jan. Just smile and nod. She'll come around." But she hadn't come around, and Janice had stopped telling him. She'd stopped laughing. She'd stopped painting. And he, the great fixer, had been so busy conquering the world that he'd let his wife be colonized in her own home. The guilt was suffocating, a heavy, leaden weight in his chest. This wasn't just on his mother. This was on him. "I have calls to take," he said, his voice flat. Janice nodded, her shoulders slumping in relief. The nod felt like a wall. He walked to his study, a room panelled in dark mahogany, a shrine to Whitman men who had come before him. He let the heavy door click shut, the sound sealing him in. He stood facing his desk, hands braced on the cool leather blotter. The security monitor, a matte black square in the corner of his credenza, waited, patient, unblinking. He had installed the system himself, top of the line, encrypted. His mother had called it new money paranoia. He entered the 12-digit code, paused, exhaled, and pressed play. The day before, unfolded in a silent, tiled grid. Foyer, staircase, kitchen, nursery hall. At first, it was nothing but the mundane ballet of a wealthy home. Maria with a laundry basket, a delivery signed at the gate, sunlight crawling across the marble. Bruce scrubbed the timeline forward, the time-lapse shadows of his own home crossing the floor like tides. He felt like a voyeur, a trespasser. 3:12 p.m. The kitchen feed caught movement at the back door. Bruce leaned closer, his heart starting a low, heavy drum against his ribs. His mother, Margaret Whitman, stepped in. She didn't use the front door. She never did. She used the garden entrance, a key she'd had for 30 years. She was immaculate. Pearl earrings, a Chanel boucle jacket in pale blue, her silver hair coiled into a precise, weaponized bun. She didn't look toward the camera. People who believe they own a place forget it can look back. He watched. Janice entered the frame, holding a mug. She looked surprised, and for a split second, terrified. She covered it with a small, strained smile. Bruce eased the timeline forward, second by agonizing second. The first minute was a performance. Cool smiles, words he couldn't hear. Janice offering the mug, Margaret refusing with a small, dismissive wave. The second minute, the chill set in. Margaret's posture changed, her chin angled down in that appraising, disdainful way he knew so well. Janice's shoulders inched up toward her ears. The third minute, the mask slipped. Bruce watched his mother close the space between them. Her finger, adorned with his grandmother's diamond, pointed like a blade. The audio was off. He'd disabled it on the indoor cameras for privacy, a decision he now fiercely regretted. But the shape of her mouth was clear. The venom was visible. "You don't belong here." Janice flinched, her hand pressing against her belly, steadying herself. She didn't answer. She just stood there, absorbing it. And then Margaret's hand darted out. It wasn't a slap. It was a shove, a hard, practiced, two-handed shove against Janice's upper arms. Janice, 7 months pregnant, stumbled back, her body hitting the edge of the marble counter with a force that made Bruce wince. Her face twisted in a mask of shock and pain. She caught herself on the counter's edge, her breath hitching. Bruce's jaw locked so hard his teeth ached. He hit rewind, played it again, slower. His stomach turned. His feet felt nailed to the floor. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't old money intensity. This was assault. He scrubbed forward. Another clip. Margaret, standing in the nursery doorway, arms folded. She was staring at the half-assembled crib as if it had personally offended her. Janice tried to edge past her. Margaret stepped, blocking the path. The confrontation was quick. Margaret's lips moved. Janice tried to answer, her expression pleading. Bruce zoomed in. Janice was crying now, trying to hide it. Then it came, the slap. It was so fast, so casual, it barely registered. A quick, flat, unceremonious strike across the face. Not a dramatic movie slap. A cold, correcting a dog slap. Janice's head snapped to the side. She steadied herself on the doorframe, one hand flying to her cheek. She blinked, fast, swallowing whatever sound tried to escape. She didn't fight back. She didn't yell. She just took it. Bruce sat back, the leather of his Eames chair groaning under his weight. He stared at the paused frame, his mother's hand in midair, Janice half-braced. A cold, prickling sweat climbed his neck. This was what his wife had been enduring. This was the accident. I wish he'd notice, Maria had said. He hadn't noticed. He'd been blind, deaf, and stupid. Outside the study, he heard footsteps in the hall. Maria and Sophia. Their voices a ribbon of worry as they passed his door. She's covering her cheek again. I know. The mark is worse today. Maybe today he will see. He muted the monitor, the silence of the room rushing in. He pressed his thumb and forefinger to the bridge of his nose, breathing slow, trying to push down the blind, primal rage that was clawing its way up his throat, yelling, confronting, smashing things. That was what she expected. That was her territory. Margaret Whitman didn't just win arguments, she staged them. If he confronted her with this anger, she would turn the room into a theater. Tears, outrage, denial. She would twist it, make him the villain, make Janice the unstable, lying interloper. He looked at the screen. The pattern was clear. Another visit, another escalation. This wasn't going to stop. It was going to get worse. The rage didn't fade, but it cooled. It settled, hardening into something heavy and precise. He would not let this be rumor or family drama. He would not let this be a he said, she said. He opened the system settings. He found the microphone icon for the kitchen camera. He clicked Enable Audio. The decision was already a structure. He would make space for the truth to reveal itself, without him there to distort the field. He would create a frame no one could wriggle out of. Clean angles, steady light, and this time, sound. He would let his mother build her own gallows. The plan formed not with the adrenaline of a fight, but with the cold patience of a siege. Bruce spent the next hour not in a rage, but in a state of chilling focus. The same focus he used to dismantle a competitor. He was no longer just a husband. He was an architect. First, he scrubbed through the last 3 months of footage. The task was agonizing. He saw the progression, the slow, insidious erosion of his wife. It started with dismissive gestures, Margaret moving a glass Janice had set down, rearranging flowers Janice had arranged, her lips moving in constant, silent correction. Then 2 months ago came the first physical contact. Margaret grabbing Janice's arm in the hallway, pulling her to a stop. Janice yanking free. Bruce's heart hammered. Janice had fought back at first, but the visits became more frequent, the aggression more pronounced. He saw his mother block Janice in the kitchen, saw her throw a magazine Janice was reading into the trash, saw her get in Janice's face, lip curling, finger jabbing. He realized with a dawning horror that his mother's visits coincided perfectly with his travel schedule. She was checking his calendar. She was waiting until he was gone. This was calculated, and Janice, he saw, had learned. She'd learned that fighting back only made it worse. She'd learned to de-escalate, to retreat, to make herself small. She'd built a prison of passivity to protect herself and her child, and he had handed his mother the keys. He looked at the footage from yesterday again. The slap, the shove, it was brutal. He rose from the desk and walked to the credenza. He adjusted a slightly crooked photo. His parents, 20 years ago, at a ribbon cutting for the new hospital wing, bearing their name. Margaret, all polish and philanthropic grace. He caught his own reflection, overlapping hers in the glass. The same jawline, the same eyes. His throat tightened. He set his palm flat against the cool wood, grounding himself. No rushing, no yelling. If he went downstairs now and held Janice, if he told her what he knew, she might be too terrified to go along with a plan. She might beg him to just let it go, to not provoke the matriarch. Or worse, Margaret would see the shift in their dynamic and retreat, disappearing underground, only to resurface later, more poisonous than before. No, he had to end this, not just stop it. End it. He needed a stage, he needed a witness, and he needed irrefutable, undeniable proof. He checked his phone. His mother's weekly supervisory lunch with the estate's head gardener was tomorrow. Wednesday. She was always here on Wednesdays, to make sure the azaleas aren't being butchered. She would be on the property. He went back to his desk. He pulled up the camera feeds. He enabled audio on the kitchen, the foyer, and the nursery hall. He checked the data storage protocols. Everything was backed up to a secure cloud server, time-stamped and encrypted. He pulled up his email. He sent a message to his driver. "Change of plans, Tom. I'll be driving myself to the city tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp." He then sent a message to his executive assistant. "Clear. Clear my schedule for tomorrow. All of it. I'll be unavailable. Family matter." He powered down the monitor. The image shrank to a pinprick of light before going black. The room felt colder. He stood there a moment longer, hands at his sides, knuckles softening. He would create a vacuum, and his mother's malice would rush to fill it. It was a trap, not of spite, but of necessity. For Janice, for their child, for the very air in this house to be safe again. He stepped back into the hallway, his face a calm, composed mask, his voice even. He found Janice in the living room, curled on the sofa, pretending to read a book. "Darling," he said, his voice smooth. "I'm so sorry. I have to go into the city tomorrow. An emergency at the office. I'll have to leave early." He watched her face. He saw the flicker of sheer, animal panic, so fast he would have missed it if he wasn't looking. He saw her fight it down. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Of course. Work is important. I should be back by dinner." He kissed her forehead. Her skin was cold. "You'll be okay?" She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "We'll be fine." He had to walk away. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Bruce rose before the sun, the lie heavy in his gut. He lay still for a long time, listening to Janice's breathing beside him. It was fragile, shallow, interrupted by soft, whimpering tremors in her sleep. He wanted to shake her awake, to tell her everything, to bundle her and her unborn child into a car and just drive. But he couldn't. The moment he did, the power shifted back to Margaret. His mother thrived on chaos she could control. The only way to beat her was with order she couldn't. By 8 a.m. he was dressed. Suit, tie, the full armor. He kissed Janice's forehead. She was awake, pretending she hadn't been crying. "I'll see you tonight," he said. "Drive safe," she whispered. He left through the front doors with deliberate noise. Staff noted the departure. Maria gave him a look he couldn't quite decipher. Was it pity or contempt? He deserved both. Tires rolled down the long gravel driveway. The estate fell quiet again, but he didn't drive to the city. He didn't even leave the property. He'd parked the Tesla in silent mode in the old carriage house at the far end of the estate, a relic from his grandfather's time. It was dusty and smelled of oil and old leather, and it was the one place he knew his mother would never, ever go. He leaned the driver's seat back, On his lap, his tablet glowed, the live camera feeds lining up in sharp, silent rectangles. Kitchen, foyer, nursery hall. He put in his AirPods. He hit the audio button, and he waited. Time slowed to a crawl. 9 a.m. The gardeners arrived. He heard Maria giving instructions in the kitchen. The sounds of a normal day. 10 a.m. Janice came down. He watched her on the feed, his heart aching. She poured a glass of water. She looked at the phone on the wall. She picked it up, then put it down. She was hugging herself, her hand rubbing her belly. 10:30 a.m. Sophia, the young maid, came in. "Mrs. Whitman, can I get you anything? Some tea?" "No, thank you, Sophia. I'm just fine." Janice's voice was a thin thread. 10:45 a.m. The silver Bentley. It didn't pull up the main drive. It slid, shark-like, up the service road and parked near the garden entrance. Bruce leaned forward, his jaw tight. Margaret stepped out, polished as ever. Today it was a cream-colored pantsuit, pearls at her throat. She didn't ring. She used her key. The sound of the back door opening was loud in his ears. Her heels tapped across the marble, measured, rehearsed. "Well," Margaret's voice, clipped and cold, filled his ears. "Still here, are we?" Janice, who had been standing by the counter, froze. Her back was to the camera, but Bruce could see her entire body go rigid. "Margaret, I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly." Margaret walked into the frame, stopping directly in front of Janice. She was inches from her face. I saw Bruce's car leave. Finally, a moment of peace. "Now, tell me, what did you say to him last night?" "What? Nothing. Don't lie to me, girl." Margaret's voice was a low snarl. "You've been moping around for weeks. I saw you crying when he came home. What pathetic little story did you spin?" "I didn't. I told him I slipped." Margaret laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Good. You're learning. Keep your stupid mouth shut, and maybe you'll get to keep the perks. But you and I need to be clear." She stepped closer. Bruce watched, his blood turning to ice. "This is my house," Margaret whispered, the microphone picking up every venomous syllable. "This is my son's house. You are just a temporary, unfortunate biological necessity. A vessel. Nothing more." "Please!" Janice's voice was barely audible. "Please don't!" "You think this baby secures your spot?" Margaret sneered. "You think that thing in your belly makes you a Whitman? My God, you are naive. You are a stain, Janice, a little league artist from a no-name family in Ohio. You think I'm going to let you dilute a bloodline? It's not. It's Bruce's baby." Janice was backing up, her hands held up. "It's your mistake," Margaret hissed. "And I'm here to correct it." And then it happened. It wasn't a shove. Not this time. Margaret grabbed the mug of tea Janice had just poured. With a flick of her wrist, she dashed the hot liquid onto the floor, the porcelain shattering in white shards. "Clean it up," she commanded. Janice flinched, staring at the mess. "Margaret, please!" "On your knees, clean it up, Janice." Tears streaming down her face, slowly, began to lower herself, her hand shaking as she reached for a piece of broken porcelain. That was it. Bruce's hand was on the door of the carriage house. He was ready to move, but he stopped. Janice had stopped too. She was still crouched, but she wasn't picking up the pieces. She was trembling, and then, very slowly, she looked up. "No," she whispered. Margaret's face, perfectly framed by the camera, went from smug contempt to livid disbelief. "What did you say?" I said. "No." Janice used the counter to pull herself back up, her hand on her belly. Her voice was shaking, but it was there. "I won't. I'm not your servant. And this is my home, too. It was the bravest thing Bruce had ever seen. It was also the last match on the gasoline. Margaret's face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. You thing!" she shrieked. "You dare?" Her eyes darted around the kitchen. They landed on the knife block. Bruce's breath caught. "No, no, no!" She moved. She grabbed the largest knife from the block, the chef's knife. She didn't raise it to stab. She held it low, almost casually. But she lifted it. She held it. "I should have done this the day he brought you home," Margaret whispered, her voice lethally calm. "Cut the rot out before it spreads." She took one step toward Janice. That was enough. Bruce was moving before the thought completed. The carriage house door flew open. He was sprinting across the lawn, the damp grass, soaking his suit trousers, his phone already in his hand. He wasn't thinking. He was pure, kinetic instinct. He didn't use the back door. He went straight for the heavy oak front doors, hitting them with his shoulder so hard the wood shuddered in its frame. The sound that ripped from his throat was not a word. It was a roar. Enough! He stormed through the foyer and skidded to a halt on the marble floor of the kitchen entryway. The scene froze. A perfect, horrific tableau. Janice, backed against the far wall, her face white with terror, her hands locked over her belly. Margaret, center stage, her arm still half raised, the gleaming chef's knife in her hand. Her head was turned, her eyes wide, not with shame or guilt, but with the sheer, animal shock of being caught. Bruce advanced, one slow step at a time. His voice, when it came, was no longer a roar. It was a low, steady cut that was more terrifying than any shout. "Put the knife down!" "Bruce!" Margaret's face instantly rearranged itself. The mask of the victim snapped into place. "Oh, thank God you're here! This creature, she attacked me. She threw the tea. She's hysterical." It was a masterful performance. Tears welled in her eyes. Her hand, the one not holding the knife, trembled. Bruce didn't even look at Janice. He kept his eyes locked on his mother. "I said, put it down." "Darling, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." He pointed up, toward the corner of the ceiling. "I understand that the 4K camera above your left shoulder has been recording, with audio, since the moment you walked in." He watched the blood drain from his mother's face. He watched her eyes dart up to the small black dome and the tiny blinking red light she had never noticed. The knife clattered to the counter, ringing sharp against the marble before rolling to a stop. Her mask didn't just crack, it vaporized. The rage returned, hotter this time, fueled by humiliation. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice a low vibration. "Spying? In your father's house?" It became necessary. He was at Janice's side now, pulling her away from the wall, tucking her behind him. Janice grabbed the back of his suit jacket, her fingers digging into the fabric like claws. He could feel her trembling. "You'll believe her over me?" Margaret spat. "Your own mother? Blood?" "I don't need to believe anyone, Mother," Bruce said, his voice dead. "I have the footage. Every shove, every slap, every word." He pulled his phone from his pocket. Every threat. He held it up. On the screen, the live feed was still playing, a few seconds delayed. He hit rewind, and the sound of Margaret's own voice filled the kitchen. "You are a stain, Janice. A temporary, unfortunate, biological necessity." Margaret stared at the phone, her mouth opening and closing. No sound came out. And then, distant but growing closer, came the sound. The clean, unmistakable wail of sirens, cutting through the manicured piece of Round Hill Road. Margaret's head snapped toward the window. What have you done?" "I called 911, Bruce said, his thumb hovering over the send button on an email already addressed to his lawyer, the video file attached. "The moment you picked up the knife, I told them there was a woman in my home, armed and threatening my pregnant wife. You wouldn't. The panic was real now, her eyes wild. The press! The family name! Bruce, this will destroy us. You're wrong, Bruce said, stepping fully in front of Janice, shielding her. It will destroy you. The family name is the last thing you should be worried about. The sirens were loud now, pulling into the driveway. Blue and red lights began to paint the pristine, white walls of the kitchen. You can't do this to me, Margaret whispered, collapsing against the counter, the perfect victim once more. I'm your mother. Bruce looked at the woman who had raised him, the woman he had feared and revered, and felt nothing. Just a cold, empty void. No, he said, as the heavy knock of a police officer echoed through the foyer. You're not. Two officers stepped into the foyer. They were not the local community police Margaret knew by name and charmed at charity balls. This was the Greenwich PD, alert and all business, responding to a high-priority domestic assault in progress call. Sir, we got a call about a woman with a knife? The lead officer, a man named Chen, said, his hand resting on his sidearm. In here, officer. Bruce's voice was steady. He didn't move from his position in front of Janice. The officers entered the kitchen. They took in the scene in a single, practiced sweep. The shattered porcelain on the floor, the chef's knife on the counter, the pale, trembling, pregnant woman hiding behind the man in the suit, and the older woman, now weeping softly against the counter. Ma'am, are you all right? The second officer, a woman named Riley, asked, her voice directed at Janice. Janice just nodded, her face buried in Bruce's back. My mother, Margaret Whitman, Bruce said, his voice devoid of emotion. She assaulted my wife. Now just a minute, Margaret shot up, the tears gone, replaced by pure indignation. This is a misunderstanding. I am Margaret Whitman. This is my son. This is my home. Officer Chen, Bruce interrupted, holding out his tablet. This will explain everything. This is a recording from the last 15 minutes. He pressed play. The kitchen went silent, save for the sound of Margaret's own voice, captured in high-definition audio, echoing through the room. You are a stain. On your knees. Clean. It. Up. I should have done this. Cut the rot out. Bruce watched the officers' faces. Their professional calm hardened. They didn't look at Margaret. They just watched the screen. When the clip reached the point where Margaret picked up the knife, Officer Chen nodded to his partner. That's enough, sir, he said. He turned to Margaret. Mrs. Whitman, I'm going to need you to put your hands behind your back. What? Margaret shrieked. You can't be serious. This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? Yes, ma'am, Officer Riley said, her voice flat as she produced a pair of handcuffs. You're a woman who just threatened another person with a deadly weapon. We call that assault with a deadly weapon and terroristic threats. The sound of the metal handcuffs snapping shut seemed to suck all the air from the room. It was a sharp, definitive click-click. Margaret's composure completely fractured. This was real. This was not a social slight. This was a booking. Bruce, stop this! Tell them! This is a family matter! She screamed, her voice cracking. Bruce finally turned to look at her, at the woman in the cream-colored Chanel suit, her hands cuffed behind her back, her face a mask of rage and fear. He knelt in front of Janice, who was now sitting on the floor, her back against the cabinet. He took her face in his hands. Are you okay? He whispered, his eyes searching hers. The baby? We're okay, she whispered back, her hands coming up to cover his. You came home. I'm sorry, he whispered, his own voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Jan. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. Behind them, the officers were reading Margaret her rights. You have the right to remain silent. You bastard! Margaret screamed at Bruce. You've destroyed this family. You'll never be forgiven for this. You've ruined everything. Bruce didn't look up. He just pressed his forehead to Janice's, shielding her from the sound, anchoring her. As Officer Chen and Officer Riley escorted Margaret Whitman in handcuffs out the front door, the neighbors were already gathering. The whispers curled like smoke from behind pristine hedges. The silver Bentley sat, abandoned, by the service entrance. A new era for the Whitman family had just begun. The house was quiet again. But this was a new silence. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of secrets. It was the light, clean silence of a space that had been scrubbed raw. The police had left. A cleaning crew, one Bruce had called from a service in Stamford, not their regular staff, had quietly and efficiently removed the broken porcelain, scrubbed the tea stain from the grout, and polished the knife marks from the counter. Maria and Sophia had been given the rest of the week off, with pay. Now it was just Bruce and Janice. They sat in the sunroom, the light fading, turning the sky a bruised purple. Janice was wrapped in a cashmere throw, sipping a chamomile tea Bruce had made. He hadn't left her side. For a long time, neither spoke. Bruce just watched her, memorizing the lines of her face as if seeing her for the first time. He'd spent their entire marriage looking at her. He was only just learning to see her. Finally, she turned to him, her eyes clear. She said she would ruin me, Janice whispered, her hand on her belly. She said you would believe her. That blood always wins. She was wrong, Bruce said, his voice rough. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Blood doesn't win. Decency wins. Love wins. John, I'm so ashamed. This isn't your fault, Bruce. Isn't it? He looked away, out at the darkening lawn. I'm a fixer. I solve problems. But I ignored the one that mattered. I let you be brave all by yourself. I let her do this. My neglect was her weapon. No. Janice's voice was surprisingly strong. She squeezed his hand. Your presence is my shield. You were busy, yes. You were blind. But you weren't cruel. She is. The call came, as he knew it would, around 7 p.m. His father, Arthur Whitman, from his study in Palm Beach. Bruce saw the name, let it ring twice, and then answered, putting it on speaker. What in God's name is going on, Bruce? Arthur's voice was a formidable boom, even over the phone. Your mother is in a holding cell. The Journal is already calling me. What is this? Hello, Father. Bruce's voice was calm. Mother was arrested today. I know that. Unarrest her. Call the commissioner. Call the governor. Fix it. She was arrested, Bruce continued, as if his father hadn't spoken, for assaulting my wife, for threatening her and our unborn child with a knife. And I have it all on video. There was a long, stunned silence on the line. The bluster was gone. A knife? Arthur stammered. Yes. And the months of abuse leading up to it. I've sent the file to my lawyer and to yours. You can fix it all you want, Father. But she will never be allowed near my wife or my child again. If I see her within 500 feet of this house, I will release the footage to every news outlet in the country. Are we clear? Another silence. Deeper. Bruce could picture his father, swirling the brandy in his snifter, recalculating. She's always been high-strung, your mother, Arthur finally said, his voice quiet. She's a violent criminal, Bruce corrected, and I'm done enabling her. So are you. He didn't wait for a reply. He ended the call. He looked at Janice. A small smile was playing on her lips. It was the first real smile he'd seen in months. That, she said, was impressive. I'm just getting started, he said, pulling her closer. This is our house now, Jan. Really. We're going to paint the nursery, whatever color you want. Yellow, she whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I've always wanted yellow." 3 months later, the headlines had faded. Margaret Whitman had been released on bail, her high-priced legal team spinning a narrative of a nervous breakdown and family stress. But the damage was done. The video, though not public, had been seen by the judge. A restraining order was in place, ironclad and permanent. The Queen of Greenwich had lost her throne. She was in a wellness retreat in Switzerland, a gilded cage of her family's own making. The Whitman estate on Round Hill Road felt different. Lighter, Bruce stood in the doorway of the nursery. It was yellow, a bright, unapologetic, sun-drenched yellow. The half-assembled crib was gone, replaced by a beautiful, hand-carved bassinet. Janice was sitting in the rocking chair, not the heirloom, but a new one, comfortable and modern, humming softly. In her arms, wrapped in a simple white blanket, was Lily. Born 2 days ago, healthy and loud and perfect. Bruce walked in, his stockinged feet silent on the new plush rug. He hadn't worn shoes in the house in months. He sat on the floor, leaning his back against the wall, just watching his family. His company was fine. The markets had risen and fallen. He'd delegated. He'd taken his first real leave in 15 years. He'd learned that the empire didn't crumble if he wasn't there for every single battle. But his family nearly had. "She's smiling," Janice whispered, looking down at the sleeping baby. "She's got her mother's smile," Bruce replied, his voice thick. He thought about the word legacy. For his entire life, it had meant buildings with his name on them, stock portfolios, bloodlines. It had been a weight, a burden, a crown. He looked at his mother, a woman so obsessed with the purity of her legacy that she'd been willing to destroy a life to protect it. Now he saw legacy differently. It wasn't in the marble foyer downstairs or the name on the hospital wing. It was right here, in this yellow room. It was the curve of his wife's smile, now easy and real. It was the warmth of his daughter in her arms. It was the peace that came not from power, but from protection. Wealth wasn't numbers on a screen. It was this quiet, unbroken, hard-won moment. Janice looked up, her eyes meeting his. She didn't have to say anything. He saw it all there, the forgiveness, the shared strength, the promise of a new beginning. For Bruce Whitman, the greatest battle of his life hadn't been fought in a boardroom. It had been fought in his own home. And for the first time, against his own blood, he had truly, finally won. That's the powerful reminder this story leaves us with. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't from the outside world, but from the very people who share our name. The bravest thing we can do is stand against a toxic legacy to protect the family we choose. Bruce's choice to stand by love over blood, and Janice's resilience in the face of terror, is a testament to the fact that true strength isn't about what you inherit, but what you have the courage to build. If you were moved by their journey to find justice and peace, please hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and redemption. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.